In the last video we did a makeover on a set of procedures, and this is in part a follow-on, another type of corporate document, slideuments as they're sometimes called, and we'll do a makeover of those. Now normally we don't actually get that involved with helping people improve slideuments, and I'll explain what those are in a minute, but we have recently on projects where people within the team are doing reports or updates for colleagues within the organisation, and on occasions we get asked by a company, they've created some slides and they'd like us to improve them. So what is a slideument? Well, it's a combination of slides and a document. So essentially it's a PowerPoint deck that is acting as more than just a presentation, acting also or instead as a document. So why would you do this? One of the reasons is that you have lots of visual information, slides, pie charts, images, media that you want to present, and you're not happy with the capabilities within Word to do that. Or you are going to do a presentation and you also need to do a document. You don't have time to do both, so you combine the two and have one document that serves both functions. And on occasions it's also used, people use PowerPoint to do e-learning, to create a sort of self-study e-learning module, because they don't have a proper e-learning app to use. Now in an ideal world you would use an alternative to PowerPoint to do these types of documents. You would do two, for example, PowerPoint and Word, or you'd use a wiki-like tool like Notion or Confluence, or a help tool that can create web pages like Madcap Flare or Adobe RoboHelp, or you'd use a tool designed for creating e-learning content such as Camtasia. However, in some organisations those aren't available. People don't have the time to use them, don't have the skills or experience in using those tools, or there are organisations that are purely Microsoft shops, and therefore all you've got to use are the Microsoft Office applications. So that lends you or guides you towards using either Word or PowerPoint. So types of examples of content that's produced. Often it can be status reports on projects. You get a mixture of presentation and content to give people an update on that. It can be overviews, 101s, guides to a topic. It can be instructional content, a how-to guide. It can be training information where it's not presented by a trainer. It can also be a brochure. There can be many uses of this sort of slideument approach. So what's wrong with these types of documents? Well, let's go through some of the common problems. One is, because they're this hybrid of neither Word document nor pure presentation, they often don't have a clear structure or a clear hierarchy. And that means that if you are reading them without the presenter presenting them, it can be hard to understand the content itself, and it can be hard to find the information that you as a reader is looking for, and it can mean that you have to wade through lots of content to get to the particular information that you're after. Another factor can be they can be difficult to read on smaller screens like on a smartphone, and that can make them less accessible to certain audiences. From a writing or creation perspective, they can be quite time consuming to write, certainly compared to a Word document, particularly if they are long and complex and they have lots of different elements of video and graphics and the like. And overall, they can be difficult for the users to understand. There can be too much content on each particular screen. So what we're going to do in this presentation is do a makeover and show an approach that we would use to improving these types of documents. So we've found some content from the web that an organisation has published. We've taken out their name and details. Overall, this document isn't too bad. We're going to look at how it can be improved. What we're not going to cover is how to present the pie charts and graphs. There are people that have done some great videos and books on how to do that. People like Cole Nussbaumer-Naflick and Nancy Duarte. So if you're interested in how to present numerical information graphically in better ways, have a look at their content. And we're also going to assume that we know the needs of the audience and who our audience is. So this is a slide deck that we're going to be working on. It comes from 2018. An organisation has published this onto the web, made it downloadable so that people can read and learn about the procurement process for themselves without the presentation. Now, normally slideuments are often a lot of slides, but because we're doing a makeover and I don't want to make a very, very long video, there's only 19 slides. We're going to start by improving the look and feel. There are other activities that we can do first, but in this case, that's what we're going to start with. Now, the reason for this is that one of the main things that users want from content is consistency. And so the way that it's presented, it needs to be consistent. It needs to be that one slide after the other is presented in a consistent way. We also need the content to be accessible and usable, and therefore in fonts and colours that are easy and accessible for users. So at the moment we have an orange font which isn't easy to use. Okay, so let's select all the slides and we'll just go with a standard design. And this has changed it to a more usable set of colours. But what we still have are some issues whereby we have different sizes of fonts and so on. So what we can do for those is there is a button called reset. And what that will do is it will reset the slides so that the fonts are consistent. Other things we can do is make the hierarchy of bullets consistent, and we can come back and revisit that. So we can go through and just use that reset button initially to get everything in a consistent format. So at this stage our document looks like this. So we have our slides in a consistent look and feel. So we now have a consistently presented document. The next step that we're going to do is to work on the navigation within the document to enable users by themselves to find the information that they need, to create the right structure and the cues and the overviews that enable them to get that information. So what we're going to do is go through the document and where it's needed, add sections and headings and navigation paths for users. So what these do is they help the user understand when we're changing from one subject or topic to another. It helps them understand what the content is so they can skim and scan to find the information so the headings match the content. And again have these navigation routes so they can jump to the section that they want. Here is our slide deck in the slide sorter view, and we can start to go through and add some headings. So there are some obvious ones that we can add at the beginning, like an introduction or an overview. I've created a background colour for the section headings, just so that they stand out. So there's a new heading at this point, and we'll work out what we'll call that in a minute. We've got information about research tools and questions here, so we've got a section about more information at the end. We've got some content here about writing the tender. And then we've got this bit in the middle that we don't have a label for at the moment. So we've got sections on planning, solicitation and evaluation, and we've got a slide here that talks about the process that we need to understand. So this section is about the government contracting process. Within these sections, often people are only looking for specific information, so we can add more navigation to help those type of users. So what we have within this section is that there are a number of stages in the government process for contracting, and people may only be interested in certain elements. So what we can do is we can create a slide that can help people navigate to those points. We can create a process diagram that has hyperlinks to the different sections. So let me show you how you can do that. We can create our flowchart, which we've done here. We can right click on a particular box in our process, hit link, and then when somebody's looking at this in preview mode, they highlight or put their mouse over certain sections within the flowchart. There's a hot spot and it can take them straight to that particular section. What we can also add is a button so that somebody can go back from that particular slide back to the main overview process slide. This is how you do it. So we want to have buttons that take us back to this slide. So we have that link to solicitation. So under Insert, Shapes, and right at the bottom are action buttons. And we can pick one called the Return. And normally that goes back to the last slide that's viewed, but we can be more specific that we want to go to the specific slide, which in this case is slide 10. And we can add it also to the evaluation slide. So now within preview, we go to solicitation. It'll take us back to our flowchart so people can navigate around and then go back to our main orientation overview slide. So we would go through this document, add a lot more signposting and flowcharts to help people navigate and jump to different sections. As we're working on the basis that the readers might not have this presented to them, that they're looking at these slides by themselves, we can also add at the front of the document the equivalent to a table of contents, have a slide that has hyperlinks to the main sections within the document. And here's an example of that. The next step is to look at the headings that are used on the slides and edit those where needed. So as a general rule within documentation, technical documentation, you have headings that describe the thing in that particular section or topic. And the same applies for slides as well. And if you end up finding that you're talking about two different things, then that's probably a strong case to split that into its own section or its own slide. So do the heading topics describe what the content is below in the slide? If it doesn't, we need to edit it. Let's look at the headings on the slides. Well, there isn't a heading for this one. We'd need to play the video and decide what the heading should be. That heading looks okay, and that one looks okay. Types of solicitation, that explains what types there are, that looks okay. Understanding the process, well, possibly it's just talking about two different things, what the process is and what to avoid during the process. So it would probably be easier to simplify that slide by having this on a separate slide. So we can do that. That describes what that slide is about. So did you know this could be improved? This could have a better title. Acquiring from small businesses might be a better title for this particular slide. And this one is about what the project office does in terms of research when they're going through the acquisition phase. So this isn't really about marketing your company, but how they do their market research. So again, we can, or we should, rename this heading, this slide. This might need some discussions to come up with the best title, but it could be perhaps researching potential suppliers or how the customer or project office does its market research. Planning, that looks good, except it would be better to have that in lowercase. This one looks okay. We can rename this one evaluation stage. This one we can reword slightly to evaluating non-price and cost factors. This one we can reword slightly. This one we can reword. This looks okay. This looks okay. This looks okay, and this looks okay. The next step is to split the slides that are talking about more than one thing. So we can split this into two slides. What you need to understand and what to avoid. We've got duplication really of the overview of the process. So we can probably delete this slide. And this one probably needs to belong somewhere else. So we can think about that, but we can put that at the end for the moment. This is another slide that we can split into two separate slides to make it easier to read. Another stage would be to look to see if there was any missing content. So for example, we created a flowchart with some key stages. Now some of them are described in the document, but not all of them. For example, administration isn't covered. There isn't any information on that. So we should go back to what you might call the subject matter expert or the person that owns this content and check whether that should be included in this document. The next stage would be to edit for clarity, edit the content, the words, the sentences, so that they're clear. Make the sentences ideally short if they are over 25 words or long. Check for any buzzwords and make sure those buzzwords are explained, or to use other words that people can understand. Now that can take a while, so we're not going to cover that in this presentation just to save time. Actually, the content, the text itself in this document is pretty clear. Where there is scope for improvement is with the decision tree diagrams, such as this one on the screen, the planning stage diagram. Now, within PowerPoint, there isn't really an easy way of creating decision tree diagrams. You need to use a hierarchical chart, either horizontal or vertical, or create it in another application and then import it. But we could reduce the colours, make it easier to read and understand. We could also simplify it by perhaps just having the main sections. Again, this isn't a decision tree, but an approximation to that, and then have another slide that dives into the detail on the specifics where there are issues around making decisions. But that's probably the biggest area where this document could be improved. And having done those primary steps, we would then go back and review our content and make some improvements to what we've done already. Look at the headings, look at the sections, check that they're right, the presentation, the look and feel, and start doing improvements in those areas. But really what we've covered are the fundamentals of getting this document into shape so that it can be read by somebody outside of it being presented. So I hope you found this makeover useful. If you'd like more information about Cherryleaf and our technical writing services, you can contact us via info@cherryleaf.com or our website www.cherryleaf.com.